Hey everyone, Laura here.
Tanya here.
We've been friends for over a decade and worked together for a long time in call centers as agents, quality analysts, managers, and supervisors.
In 2018, we started up this podcast to talk about the batshit bonkers bullshit we see and continue to see in our time at work and at home as consumers.
This episode, however, is unique. We do these deep dive episodes where we talk about corporate scandals like Enron, scams like Theranos, or even cons like Scientology.
This is one of those episodes, so enjoy.
Love your faces.
Smooches.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
This job would be great if it wasn't for the fucking customers.
We're always this stupid. Did you take lessons? Just calm down.
Oh, fuck you!
You can't handle the truth.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
In other words, be nice, asshole.
Now she had a name, the money, and the beginnings of a board. And the first few years, it seemed like quiet, kind of nose to the grindstone. This is the period of time where the book really dives in to see how the culture of Theranos was being built and how the paranoia started to settle in to the foundation of the entire company. So let's talk about Ian Gibbons. He was the first experienced scientist I mentioned that she hired. And he had a Cambridge PhD, multiple degrees, had over 200 patents to his name. Right? This guy was a genius.
Wow.
And that's the patents are going to be really important later on. So I think Rebecca Jarvis said it best when she talked about his wife, Rochelle, that she's quiet, she's soft-spoken, but sure of herself. And because Ian's the one who committed suicide. She lost her husband over this stupid fucking company. Like, it's so sad. And it seems like he was a person that, and they didn't say this, but maybe he was like terrified of retirement. And he was terrified she was going to fire him and he wouldn't be able to find another job.
Right.
I don't think he really understood his own value.
Right.
Like, he would have been snatched up.
By anybody.
Are you kidding me? But Elizabeth ended up attaching her name to the patents that they filed. And he thought that maybe he could make this microfluidic thing work. He began working on the product and was described as invaluable to the younger scientists, helping them with their experiments along with their assays. Now, assays is a fancy word for blood test, basically. So while he was working on how to make this thing work on a fucking drop of blood, she began hiring engineers and others to design the box, like just the look of it. And the short version of this story is she had hired a team, but they challenged her too much. And the leader of the group would tell her sometimes, like, that doesn't work. The laws of thermodynamics they can't work. So she hired a competing team. And what they did was they ordered a glue dispensing robot, took the glue dispenser out of it, and put a pipette, the little thing that sucks up fluid that you squeeze like a turkey baster type thing. They put a pipette on it, and now they had the machine. But that's all it did. It was just an arm that went back, forward, up, down, right, left. And she fired that whole other engineering team because these guys gutted a glue bot and put a pipette in it. That's it. And for her, it seems like she felt like, okay, we got it now. We're good. We got a product.
I am so confusion.
Oh, yeah. Trust me. When you listen to the book, or I listen to the audiobook. When you listen to the book or read the podcast, listen to the podcast, read the book, or watch the documentary, it really does feel like all of a sudden she just goes to like nothing to having 700 employees. You're like, wait, how did this happen? Wait, hold on.
Right.
So she was adamant that the box couldn't be bigger than 2 feet by 3 feet. And she didn't understand why doing all of this in one box was not as simple as put it in there and go. For blood tests, there are certain blood tests where temperatures have to be different for each test. It's absorbing light differently. Like,
That's why they take
four
or five
vials.
fucking vials of blood.
Exactly. She did not understand this. And to her, because when you tell a 19-year-old that they're brilliant this much and you're already comparing them to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, they have not failed in their life enough to be humble and to understand when something isn't possible.
Right.
She's like, well, I think it's possible. And all these people are telling me I'm brilliant. So of course it's possible.
No. I just don't understand. Like, okay, maybe you are kind of smart, but
yeah,
because you've obviously swindled people out of $1 gazillion at this point, but you're not brilliant. You're not, I can set the world on fire with one piece of blood. Brilliant.
Well, they said this multiple times in all of the sources that this is not developing an app that gives you puppy dog ears or emojis. This is a medical product. Right. This is not something that you can just throw out there and nobody's going to get hurt.
Right. Because I know, even look how much testing has been done on certain things, like that thing you put on your arm to check your blood sugar. I mean, that's just now becoming readily available in the last few years.
Yeah.
You know, so look how many trials they probably had to do with that. One drop of blood, one drop of blood. Bitch, oh my God. I just don't understand I don't know.
So this is the part where Sonny, her boyfriend, he was not part of the company, but it seems like Liz was starting to listen to him. And he's really responsible for a lot of the scary stuff. They eventually called him the enforcer.
Oh.
So at this point, all they had was this fucking glue bot. That's it. And she started poaching people from Apple to come design it, like the look of it.
Now, she ended up poaching a woman named Anna.
Now, Anna is one of my new favorite humans. I love her. And it's confusing in the podcast, and the only reason I'm mentioning this is because the podcast really threw me. She's transgender, so she sounds like a man. But they kept saying her, and I was like, what? Am I listening to this wrong? So finally I looked up a YouTube video. She's amazing. I love her so much. Oh my gosh, she's beautiful. And she was a designer. She loves minimalist design. She was part of the team that designed the original iPhone.
Shut up.
And she incorporated her love of minimalist design in the iPhone. And Elizabeth Holmes poached her. And she was so goddamn convincing. This is amazing. She convinced Anna to leave Apple and leave before she could get an additional 15,000 shares of Apple stock. That works out to be about $3 million. This woman was so goddamn convincing. She convinced her to leave $3 million on the table because Anna felt like this was something that could change. Think about it. You're already part of the team that designed the iPhone. You already changed the world.
Right.
Now you're going to change the world again? It was too tempting. It was just too tempting to pass up. And a whole bunch of people from Apple came over with her. Now, she wanted to make the design of the box. Elizabeth wanted to make the design of the box look like Apple's. But the designers came over and they couldn't figure out why they were being treated like crap by other employees. And finally they realized, oh, it's not that you don't like us. We can't add value to this company yet because the box doesn't work. We can't design anything when there's nothing to design around.
Around it, yeah.
Like, hello.
You don't know how big this is going to be. You don't know where it's going to go. You don't know anything.
Now, Anna is also responsible for her look. This is so funny. And this is another part of the narcissistic sociopath, allegedly. When Anna met her, now, when she was in college, she dressed like a normal college kid, jeans, t-shirts, whatever. When Anna met her, all of a sudden, all year long, she was wearing these super gaudy, tacky Christmas sweaters. And it felt like her trying to project an air of being so much of a nerd that she wouldn't know. Like it felt like The Voice.
Right.
It's her trying to fit into an image. Right. And Anna's like, okay. But then because of her fascination with Steve Jobs, she asked a lot about Steve and she wanted to know about the black turtleneck. And she explained to her Steve's relationship with a designer named Issei Miyake, who designed Sony's line manager like uniforms. And Jobs loved that. And he got him to design his black turtleneck. And the idea was he wears the same thing every day, so he never has to think about it. And he has like enough turtlenecks to last for his whole life. So all of a sudden, she comes in, she's wearing all black pants, and she's like, oh, but he wore jeans, black pants, black turtleneck, black jacket, black sweaters, whatever. All black all the time. She's like emulating Jobs. Right? Anna's really responsible for her look. But she's also, her hair looks like it has never met hot oil. And God knows it needs it. But her disheveled hair, because she takes a lot of time on her makeup, clearly.
Yeah, I saw that.
Right? But she doesn't do anything with her hair. I feel like that's her also trying to project this air of a nerdy scientist. Like it's her trying to be this.
Right. Not to look like she put too much effort into how
like
she
she's
looks.
a 19-year-old, early 20s kid. Now we're going to talk about another Apple person who, in my opinion, Anna's one of my favorite humans now. This man is one of my least favorites. And I get that in Silicon Valley he has a reputation as being a teddy bear, but I don't give a shit. You dropped the ball here, sir. You suck. So this dude he eventually was put on the board, and he was Steve Jobs' right-hand man, Avi Tevanian. So he had left Apple after making more money than he knew what to do with. I mean, think about it. Your right hand, what you developed, of course. So he had left, and he was asked to join the board of Theranos. He had been approached by a headhunter, joined the group. Now, he would ask things like, can I see the contracts that you say you're negotiating? He's a board member, of course.
Right.
And she was like, oh, I don't have them. And he was like, what? What do you mean you don't have them? They would bring the box in to do demonstrations, and it never worked. And he was led to believe, just like everybody else, that this was already a finished product. So finally, after a year, he sits down and looks at the materials he got when he first joined, and he realized every single thing about the company had changed. Everything. The amount of people that got fired, like all this, everything had changed. So he was like, no, this is failing, right? So she decided she wanted to start a foundation and put some stock in the company in the foundation, but she would be the one controlling it. And he was like, she's already got a ton of power as the CEO. Why do we want to give her more? We're here supporting this early 20-year-old girl.
Right.
We need to have a way to check her. And at that point, she's like, he asked too many questions. We need to get rid of him. So Don Lucas, the chairman of the board, his friend, calls him into his office and is like, Elizabeth wants you to leave the board. And he's like, okay. So he says to him, he shows him all the information. Look how much has changed over the year. This doesn't work yet, but she is saying it does. So I think we can make this work. We need to find a different role for Elizabeth, like if you want to be the COO or something.
Right.
But we need to take control of this. And Dawn freaked out and was like, no. And took her side over his and was like, can you just resign? But then he says, and I have a visceral reaction to this because even though I know what she ended up being, it still fucking irks me. He's like, she did things as a CEO that I wouldn't have imagined a person would do. And believe me, I work for Steve Jobs. I saw some crazy things. Let's talk about Steve Jobs. Because unless he didn't give any examples of things she did that were more crazy than him, but it feels like some sexist bullshit.
Right.
So Steve Jobs walked into an interview that another person was conducting to hire somebody at Apple and was like, Are you a virgin? When did you lose your virginity? When was the last time you did LSD? Like, did she do something like that?
Right.
He screamed and fired people in giant groups, like in front of people. He fired an entire department and didn't give them a severance, and HR begged him to at least give them 2 weeks notice. And he said, okay, I'll give them 2 weeks notice, but it's retroactive from today. Like, he was an asshole, and it just feels like...
Oh, in his personal life, he was an asshole, too.
Right. Unless you can, and maybe I'm wrong, but unless you can point to something that shows that she did stuff worse than him, I don't want to fucking hear it.
Right?
Right. Eat a dick. So, what irks me about him is Don Lucas says, okay, leave. But we want you to give us back the stock. We want you to forfeit the stock in the company.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, what? No. And they're like, well, we'll sue you if you don't. And they email him on Christmas Eve, threatening to sue him.
Oh, my God.
Right? So he goes to a friend who's a lawyer. And the friend says, if everything you're saying is true about this company, they're probably going to go out of business in 2 years. Do you really want to own more of it? And he was like, yeah, you're right. It's not my problem. Fuck you. You joined the board of a medical company. I don't care if you want to leave it. He even said in the interviews with Rebecca Jarvis, like, it would have exposed her, not necessarily as a fraud, but at that point, it would have exposed that this was not working. Now, this does not need, like, hindsight 2020. Had you had any critical thinking you and I do this all the time, like game out what could happen.
Right.
You're literally watching this kid manipulate friends and people that you've known for decades. They're putting their reputation on the line. Yeah. And they're not stopping her when you know this product does not work. This did not take hindsight 2020. You are the reason that these barely out of college kids and their parents had to spend almost $500,000 on legal bills. You are the reason that that patients were impacted, that the state of Arizona was impacted, that doctors were impacted, because it wasn't your problem. Fuck you. Oh, that man irks me. And I read an article about how he's the unsung hero of the story. I'm like, no, he's not. He's a fucking coward. He walked away like, not my problem. You know what? So you left it to other people who didn't have the fucking money. You had the money to do this. He's like, his lawyer friend was like, do you really want to waste the money? I'm like, to make sure that people don't get hurt? Yeah, I would waste that fucking money. Jesus. It just irks me. Like, and we've worked with those people for so many years that were like, not my problem.
Not my problem. Doesn't affect me.
So instead of being a good person, you ended up being a typical self-serving rich guy. Like,
right.
Seriously.
It doesn't affect you, so I wash my hands of it.
Not my problem. You left 2 kids to do what you had the time and resources to do. Smart? Sure. A good person? You suck, in my opinion. You saw all this bonkers shit that could be affecting patients' lives. And you just said, fuck it, not my problem. So back to Anna. I need to go back to talking about one of my favorite humans rather than that piece of garbage. Now, Anna came on board and brought a whole bunch of Apple people with her. And they were kind of sitting around with nothing to do because they can't
move forward.
Right. Now, at this point, her boyfriend, Elizabeth Holmes' boyfriend, Sonny Balwani, had not joined the company. It wasn't until he joined the company that these NDAs started and the threatening of former employees and all this shit. So before that, she had what caused Anna to leave is Elizabeth announces to the company that they've gotten Pfizer to agree to a study with stage 3 and 4 cancer patients using this box. Now, Elizabeth didn't tell anybody that the results would not be used for treatment. They were just for research purposes, but this freaked everyone out. Like, and Anna was one of the few people that would flat out tell her. Like, it was kind of like how I was.
She looks like a badass, too.
Right. She looks amazing, right? She looks like she'll kick your ass. It feels like she had the relationship, like she was like me and Frank. You remember how I would just tell Frank to go fuck off. Like, even though he was technically my boss. Like, she would tell her, like, you're doing something that is impacting patients' lives. We need to stop this. And instead of just telling her it's just for research purposes, she wanted to keep up the facade.
Right.
So Anna just left. She was like, fuck you.
Okay, so this Anna lady, I had never seen her before. And not to be mean, because I love all my peoples. She kind of reminds me of Philip Seymour Hoffman. In this picture right here.
She does.
She does. And I loved Philip Seymour Hoffman. I fucking loved him. He was in a movie where he played this drag queen who was saving up giving singing lessons to Robert De Niro. And she was giving singing lessons, and he had a stroke. And it was part of his therapy, right? And they lived in the same building and everything. And I can't remember the name of the movie. I just watched it a couple months ago. But that's kind of what she reminds me of. She seems like she would be a kick-ass person. Like she is. Like she wasn't going to take she wasn't taking any guff.
No, she was not at all. So she found out that all the things that they were doing, it seems like, to cover the fact that it didn't work. So they created some software. So this is the deception process, basically. They created a software that instead of the screen showing an error message, it would just get stuck at 70%. And they would just tell them, oh, it just has to warm up. And they would know that they needed to reboot it.
That's some shit. So and he wanted to try this out on people with cancer.
So it would hide the error messages.
That sounds like a great idea.
So that's one way they hid it.
Oh my God.
So what they would do is, because it would be stuck at 70%, they would tell people, you know what, this is going to take a while. Why don't we do a tour? And they would leave the room. Somebody would come in, take the thing, the cartridge holding the blood out of it, run it to the lab, run it on traditional machines, and then come back and be like, here's your results.
No.
It was a fucking scam. It was a total scam. And you can't run blood on that small of a sample, so it wasn't even real results.
Oh my God.
So, good Lord. So Anna basically is like, bye. And she quit. Now, because Sonny was not there, she didn't have to sign NDAs. She wasn't sued. None of that crap. Right? All the Apple people seem to be a lot more open and talking because they were pre-Sonny. But this is how Elizabeth was able to sell to other people later on down the line, that we did all this work with other pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer.
Oh, God.
When they didn't. They didn't. And Pfizer eventually said, we're underwhelmed by your results. We're not part of
Keep
it.
our name out your mouth.
Exactly.
That's all. Do you know how many lives that would have impacted if somebody would have really fallen for this?
It did.
And
it did.
Oh, God.
Oh, just wait. Remember I told you about the state of Arizona?
Yeah.
It impacted a boatload of people in Arizona.
Oh.
So back to microfluidics. That big challenge was getting that to work was key. But one employee thought he had solved the problem. Now, admittedly, and this is once again one of the things with Sonny, that where Sonny came on board, I think this was the point, right before this happened. Sonny came on board, and the threats and the intimidation and the enforcer thing started, right? Oh. So this guy thought he had solved the problem of microfluidics. And quite frankly, this man is a moron. If I were Elizabeth, I would be furious fucking too. I don't know what they were thinking, but this really set the stage for her to think that everybody was trying to steal their technology.
What technology? A box you can't fucking make? Come on.
Like, oh my God. So he thought he had solved the problem. And what he did was he quit the company and he formed his own company that would do the same thing. But it would be for veterinarians. Because he thought it would be easier to get FDA approval if it was for animals. He couldn't find any investors, so like a dumbass, he messages her. He's like, hey, do you want to invest in my company? Where I took your business model and I'm just doing it for vets? She freaked the fuck out. She called all the employees down and even told them, we've called the FBI. And they sued them. Now, eventually, they gave they handed over the patent to her.
Right.
But that really set up in her mind that other people are trying to steal all of this information. And this seems to be where Sonny came into the picture and the NDAs came into being. Employees had to sign giant stacks of papers saying they wouldn't discuss, where they work. They wouldn't tell their friends and family. They didn't want them to put on LinkedIn that they even worked for Theranos, right? So, and they siloed each group. Now, this is key. What they did was they said, okay, the engineers are over here and the chemists are over here. Just two groups as an example, right?
Right.
If the engineers design something that the chemists know is not going to work for the design, they can't talk to each other. The chat ports were blocked. They could not, they were completely siloed from each other. So everybody could keep working forever and never get anything done. So even if this technology was possible,
nobody would know. Because
you're never going to get it done.
This whole thing is so, okay, maybe I'm just too honest.
It's bonkers.
This seems like some shit that, I could just walk into somebody's office. Like, I could go to the guy who owns our business and be like, hey, I got this great idea. Schmooze him for a while, make him feel good about himself, and then get $1 gazillion from the dude and start some fake-ass company.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically all she's done.
Yeah.
I'm going to come up with some sort of fucking idea.
I know.
To, make rainwater, make you skinny or something. And just, this is what we'll do.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to call it skin tea water.
So they also told them that if they post anything, tell me if this doesn't sound familiar. They were like, if you post anything negative on Glassdoor, we have ways of finding that out.
My God. They have
Tell me if this don't sound familiar. They had her executive assistant friend every employee on Facebook and report to them what they say.
Yeah.
We experienced that. You
sure
fucking
did.
cunt if you're listening. I would sooner sell crack to children than work for her or that company ever
I used to say that I would much rather sell my ass on the streets, live under a bridge, and eat beans out of a can before I worked for them again.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So when they would actually have meetings where they wanted to discuss, like when they actually got the scientists in the room with the engineers to actually discuss things, all of a sudden Elizabeth would direct the conversation to discussing something completely meaningless. Like they had a 2-hour meeting where they were supposed to discuss things seriously, like the size of the box that they wanted everything to fit in. And Elizabeth turned it into a 2-hour conversation about what they were going to name the cloud where all this data would be stored. And they ended up going with Yoda. I'm pretty sure that
name's already taken, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure that's not the most serious part. Like, that you may want to, and the guy in the documentary is like, time out. How big does this box need to be to abide by the laws of thermodynamics? Like,
right.
Fuck you. Oh my God. So the IT guys were spying on them. This was creepy too. And I'm not sure if this happened where we used to work, but it wouldn't surprise me. Let's say I send an email to you and I don't copy Sunny and Elizabeth. Sunny would respond to those emails. Every email went to him too. He was blind copied and employees didn't know it. Every single email.
Oh my God.
So they could see exactly what they were talking about. And tell me if this don't sound familiar, and when two people, we'll get to later, the two whistleblowers became friends, they yelled at them, like, you two shouldn't be talking. Does that sound familiar? When they were like, you guys shouldn't take breaks together. I'm like, sorry, we're friends. I know you don't know what friends are, but friends are people that actually like each other. I know that's a foreign concept to you.
Right, because you're all a bunch of backstabbing snakes, but...
Exactly.
These fucking people kill me.
Oh, yeah. So because of this silo thing, it made people even distrust people in other departments. And they just couldn't get anything done. They monitored LinkedIn. They monitored Glassdoor. They had HR putting a ton of fake good reviews to balance out the bad ones. Sonny would track how many hours they worked, and if they didn't work 10 to 12 hours, he would attack them as not being loyal enough. Like, this concept of work-life balance Elizabeth worked every single day from sunup to sundown. She only slept like 4 hours a night.
Sounds like some other crackpot that we have floating around the fucking White House.
So they would actually cater dinner every night so you didn't have to leave, but it wouldn't get there. They purposefully had it show up at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. so that you wouldn't even get out of there until like 10. Yeah. She put in like a 14-hour day.
Fuck that.
So, and she told people, I'm building a religion.
A religion?
Yeah.
No. You're
Like, it was scary. The things, and Sonny actually held, like, when they had people from India come over and work for them, he would hold their visas over their heads. Like, if they didn't do what he wanted them to do.
That's so illegal.
And they realized that the company was turning into sycophants versus cynics. And it's very Enron, because all the people that would just tell Elizabeth, like, that's not going to work, she would just say, you're not cut out for Silicon Valley. Like how they did at Enron, where they were like, you're just not smart enough.
Right.
She did that all the fucking time.
I'm not smart enough, but I'm also not dumb enough to buy into your bullshit. This is not a thing.
And they were like, she was like, you should go work in an industry where excellence is not expected.
Oh.
Yeah.
This lady is a nutball. Wow. And there are people out there that believe this shit. They drank the Kool-Aid.
Absolutely. They even said it
drank the
in the
fucking
documentary.
Kool-Aid.
Totally. Now, they actually found ways to manipulate them, which is funny. This sounds like what I used to do to Harry. For those of you who have not listened before, Harry was one of the other department managers that I worked for who was from India, who was a total asshole. He called one of my coworkers fat to her face one day. He was like, wow, you put on a ton of weight. Like, he was a dipshit, evil piece of crap. He was awful. But what they would do to Sonny, because he barely had business knowledge, let alone scientific knowledge. They would actually, if they wrote an email that was over 500 characters, they knew he wouldn't read it. So, or they would schedule meetings that would be super long, knowing that he would probably pop in and then just leave. And then they could actually get work done. That's how they got around him. Or they would use words incorrectly, like scientific terms, just to see if he would do it. No, just to see if he would copy them. And he did. Like, and they just thought it was hilarious. Like, good Lord. But yeah, what these former employees describe her as being a narcissist who makes you feel special at first and then starts to denigrate you.
So they call it gaslighting.
Right, exactly.
Gaslighting.
It is gaslighting.
They love bomb you, and then they gaslight you.
Uh-huh.
And then they love bomb you again so that you get over the gaslighting.
And Frank did that to me. Like, we were best buddies, and when he needed something from me, he was at my desk every day asking me questions, just chit-chatting. The second he didn't need anything from me, remember when we were shutting down and he went to go run that other department? Never saw him again. He didn't need anything from me at that point.
Yep.
And it makes you feel bad as a person. Like, what did I do?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
And that's really what she did. And that really reminded me of Frank. But what they called him around the office was he was a man-child of limited intelligence who had no experience in pathology or blood testing or laboratory sciences. He would say things being over the lab. He was in charge of day-to-day operations.
In the lab? Mm-hmm. But he didn't have any kind of medical background.
Nope. And one of the scientists actually said he would say things that were just inappropriate. Not wrong. She literally called it inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
Like, oh my God. So this guy, I feel bad for this guy. And this is where the whole, like, it really started crossing the line into the land of the ridiculous. It's already ridiculous, but this is even worse. One of the guys who worked for them had developed a patent for this special bicycle light thing, right?
Okay.
And he'd come up with it in his spare time, got it patented, put it on Kickstarter, and raised like $250,000 in a month. That year, it was the 7th highest amount collected on Kickstarter, right? It was huge. And he was so excited. So he mentions it to Elizabeth, and she freaks the fuck out, saying that anything that comes from his mind while he works there is hers. And he needs to sign that patent over to her and Sonny.
For a bicycle light?
What is bicycle light?
Are you going to put it on the new meter thing that you're going to put on people? You dumb bitch, it blinks. What the blinks, fuck?
And they literally would not let it go. Every meeting, they would harass him. You need to sign it over to us. You need to sign it over to us. You need to sign it over to us. Over and over and over. And he was just like, I don't fucking understand. So finally they were like, okay, why don't you just take a leave of absence and go work on this little side project? We can't believe that you're leaving this position where, we're changing the world to leave for a bicycle light. And it was like, fuck you. And she was like, once you're done exploring this little passion project, we'll discuss if you can come back. Yeah.
Fuck you.
Exactly.
Lizzie.
Like, what does bicycle lights have to do with blood testing? Like, this is not like the veterinary use thing, like, from before.
Right.
This is different.
This is on people.
Like, oh my God. So, here's an example of somebody questioning her that got fucked. Henry Mosley was their CFO, and he was part of the inner circle. He found out he had done a valuation on the company at almost $10 billion, which is what she wanted, but him to say, like to tell people, our company is worth $10 billion. He knew that projection was high, but he thought that if Theranos executed everything they said they could do perfectly, it was possible to get there.
Oh, okay. You know how when Donald Trump had those people evaluate his companies and stuff like that, and they said that it was worth this million billions and this many billions and this many billions.
That's just guesswork.
We projected that it's going to be worth this much,
right?
And this is what our P&L is going to look like. So this is how much this is going. Oh yeah, no. Oh my God. So just a bunch of.
That's what it is.
It's not even real fucking money.
No, it's not. So,
and people give them loans and they give them grants based on of what their projection is. Oh my Lanta.
So she pushed him.
Not just a hat rack.
She just tapped her head and said, not just a hat rack. So she pushed him to push it higher, which he was a little uncomfortable with, but he felt like if they executed perfectly, they could hit it. Now, they had gone to, a whole bunch of them had gone to Switzerland to do a demo for another pharmaceutical company. It had not gone well. Like, it failed in the room, in front of a whole bunch of people. Like, It was awful. So when they came back, she was like ecstatic, saying it went great. And everybody else who went on that trip were acting like they just saw somebody kick their puppy.
Right.
Like, so he like pokes and prods them to tell him what happened. And then he finds out that the demos that they've been doing are fake, right? They're not real. This product is not ready. So he goes into a meeting with her. Now, once again, at this moment, he is in the inner circle. They have a meeting. They have their normal meeting. It runs its course. No big deal. And then he asks her about the Switzerland trip. She lies. And he says, well, some of the other employees told me this happened. And she shrugged it off and said, it's okay. It's an easy fix. And he said, if the demos that we're doing are fake, we need to stop doing them because we could be charged with fraud. Elizabeth's whole demeanor changed and she said, you know what, Henry? You're not a team player and I think you need to leave. Fired him, not just the room, on the spot fired him. For that one comment.
One little comment.
She fired him.
Because he wasn't a team player.
Because he knew the fraud. That's why. Anybody who knew the fraud and was willing to call it out, she got rid of like that.
Well, look, we dealt with that too somewhat. Because if you knew that, people were trying to do sneaky shit, underhanded shit on the back end.
And what kills me, and we were going to talk about this later, but we may as well talk about it now. Her and Sonny would say later in the SEC, like, I trusted the scientists.
Wait,
and the
okay,
PhDs.
hold on. That's what I'm curious about. What kind of voice did she use when she spoke to the SEC? Did she use her
deep voice?
Her deep voice?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's still up with the scam.
Okay.
So they're like, we trusted our scientists and our doctors and blah, 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 blah. Do you remember where our old company, Chucky's, Shoe, and Cal, wanted me to commit what I considered to be fraud.
Yeah.
And they pulled me into a room, all these upper level managers, senior directors, all these people pushing me for like 4 hours, trying to convince me to commit fraud. Yeah. And they would not. And I was like, send me an email saying, this is what you told me to do. Because if our client finds out, I need to be protected.
Right.
And they refused. I was like, if it's not fraud, why wouldn't you put it in an email?
Right.
Fuck you.
Right.
And then I kept saying, if they find out, you guys are going to sacrifice me. And they were like, you don't trust us. This is why I don't trust them. Because Sonny and Elizabeth went into the SEC saying, we trusted our scientists and our doctors, even though they were the ones who told them, sit down, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not smart enough, fired them, did all this shit. And I was like, that is what that group of dipshits would have done to me.
Yep. Exactly.
You don't trust us? No. I don't.
Not as far as I can fucking throw you.
You're crazy if you think I trust you. What ended up happening was she took his laptop to the IT guy, and he found out that Henry had been browsing porn at work. And she used that as blackmail, as an excuse to not give him his stock in the company.
That's
Now, every employee that she fired, she would go to IT and ask them, I shit you not, to put together a dossier on them to blackmail them if they ever went to the press or something.
Oh my God.
She literally did this. Like, how crazy are you? What kind of seriously demented, sick, twisted fucking human are you?
Just disgusting.
Okay. So then there were employees that they actually put at risk. Once again, this is like the thing at Chucky's and Shoe and Cal where they were like, commit fraud. The head of the lab was freaking out because his name was on the CLA, I can't remember, a CLIA or something like that, certification, and he felt that he could be held responsible when shit came to life.
Right.
And he's the one who originally got in contact with the Wall Street Journal reporter, right? Mm-hmm. And he eventually left. And he had forwarded a whole bunch of his emails with Sonny to his Gmail account to protect himself. But when he left, they presented him with this paper. It's another NDA. that they made him, they tried to make him sign, saying you don't have any emails in your personal possession. And they were like, we know you sent yourself emails. You need to let us access your Gmail account so we can delete them. Demanded that he give them access to his Gmail account.
No.
Fuck you. No. They literally stalked and harassed him until finally he got a lawyer. Had to pay a $10,000 retainer to a lawyer. And the lawyer was like, yeah, you kind of violated their policy. Like, they can come after you. He's like, it's a $10 billion company. So he deleted him. And this is like the NDAs were people leaving. This was my favorite story in the whole book. I cracked the fuck up laughing. This guy left and he was like a big like linebacker dude. And they wanted him to sign an NDA. And he was like, no. I'm not signing an NDA. I signed one when I got here. I don't need to sign another one, right? So they had left the room to like have a little chat, and then they didn't come back forever, so he just got up and left. Sonny and HR chased after him, and he just ignored them. They sent a security guard to chase after him. He ignored them as well. They called the police because he didn't sign an NDA. The police roll up, and they're like, what happened? And he's like, an employee quit and he stole something. And they're like, okay, what was stolen? And Sonny goes, he stole things in his mind.
Oh, God. In his mind.
They didn't say in the book what happened, but I have a feeling the cop was like, sir, that's
off.
a business dispute. That is not something to call the police
Right,
for.
you just wasted my fucking time.
Exactly. Like, you're insane.
He stole it in his mind.
Like, he literally said that.
That's funny.
Killed me.
He stole it in his mind. And you know what? I need you to subpoena his mind and erase everything out of it. The fuck?
So here's where Safeway and Walgreens got involved.
Oh, Jesus. Of course,
So,
Walgreens.
I'm just going to take this off. This is bothering me.
Shit.
I have a little clip-on hair thing, and I just took it off and threw it on the ground. Tanya's like, oh my God.
I mean, I knew it was there, but I just didn't expect for you to rip it off and throw it on the ground.
It's bothering me. I can't figure it out. So they had approached Safeway and Walgreens, once again, convincing them that this product already was finished and worked, right? And they said Safeway was going to be the exclusive provider in grocery stores where you could just walk in, get your finger pricked, and get all these things diagnosed in your local Safeway. And Walgreens would be the official pharmacy.
I don't want the lady at Safeway pricking my finger.
No.
I mean, yes, there's a pharmacy in there, and yes, they do like flu shots and pneumonia shots, but I don't feel safe having you prick my finger and tell me what the fuck is wrong with me. Hey, this is Bob from from Safeway.
You have cancer.
Yeah, you have cancer. And by the way, we have hamburger ground chuck for $2.99 a pound. The fuck out of here! No.
Now, the way that they sold it, I know, right? The way that they sold it to the two of them was by saying that they had worked with all these pharmaceutical companies. They told them that the product had been reviewed by Johns Hopkins University, and they had said that it was great. And they also convinced them that they had done work with the military. Now, this is how they got in contact with James Mattis. One of the board members had contacted Mattis and wanted to know if they could use their pitch was, we can save lives on the battlefield because we can diagnose people with something instantly when they're injured. So Mattis was like, yes, because think what you want about Mattis. He does care about his soldiers.
He's a lifelong soldier.
Absolutely.
That's his job.
Yes. So he's wanting it to get done, right? But the PhD, a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Shoemaker, I think was his name, he's like, no, this does not have FDA approval. And unlike what some people believe, we can't just experiment on soldiers without FDA approval.
Right. That seems wrong.
So what they did was they offered them like blood post incident. So they could study it to see if what happened to them, they could tell from the blood that they got when it was over. Right. And other pharmaceutical companies and research companies were like, do you know what I would kill for to get that? And they refused. They refused to do it. But Mattis freaked out on Shoemaker and was like, he needs to come see me now. I want this done. So Shoemaker now is terrified that he's pissed off a 4-star general like James Mad Dog Mattis, has to go down and he has to patiently explain. And he said he was gruff, but reasonable. And basically that was their compromise, offering the blood post. But he's like, because we can't do this, sir.
Right.
But because he then retired from the military and joined her board.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Mattis joined her board. So because he was on the board, they were able to convince Walgreens, they were able to lie and say that it was already in use in the back of Humvees and all this shit. Right? They presented them a flag that they said flew over Afghanistan that they signed.
First off, you don't sign flags.
Isn't that fucking stupid?
Yeah, you can't sign a flag. That's like, you don't do that. But do the people in fucking Walgreens and Safeway just not do any of their homework and look at any of this?
And you know what? We're going to get into that right now.
Like,
so they were... Safeway had a razor thin profit margin, and their CEO had become obsessed with healthcare because he had seen like the rising cost of healthcare he thought was going to eventually bankrupt Safeway just for their employees.
Well, they have like, just like King Soopers now, they have like a whole little fucking doctor's office in there.
Exactly.
Walgreens is doing the same thing.
You know why they have those doctor's offices in there?
Why? Because they thought they were going to do this shit on
They
people.
spent millions redesigning all of their... Walgreens didn't necessarily, but they spent millions creating little offices, top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art, beautiful little spaces for this Theranos thing. They spent all this money, but their fear was... And they scammed them with the tests, with the fake, like... Oh, it's just taking a while to warm up.
Let's go get a coffee or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They scammed them, right? But this guy named Hunter was hired by Walgreens to vet the technology, right? But they wouldn't let him see it. They sent him one of the devices, but it had that like do not break tape, so he couldn't open it, and he never got it to do anything. When he went to visit the site, they wouldn't show him the lab. He's supposed to be there to validate what they're doing, and he won't see the lab. Instead, they showed him Sonny's office with a sleeping bag in it, proudly showing him a sleeping bag, like, I sleep in the office. This is how dedicated I am. And he's like, that's great. Can I see your lab? I don't care where you sleep, jackass. Like,
oh, my God.
So Hunter couldn't get this to work. And finally, he's like raising the alarm bells. And eventually, Elizabeth says, I don't want him in any of our meetings. He's dragging it down, like by saying real shit.
Right.
So they had him stop coming to the meetings. And he was like, look, this is going to be bad. And they were like, if it turns, and they were already having their doubts. But they were like, if it turns out to be real and they have a deal with CVS in 6 months, we're in trouble. Their rivalry with CVS is crazy.
Right. And I get that. But
they didn't vet the technology the way that they should. It was, and the way that they describe it in the book is it was a severe case of FOMO, the fear of missing out, where they were just like, what if it's real? And they let them be scammed.
Are real.
They let themselves be scammed.
Yeah.
And they were paying this Hunter guy his firm $25,000 a month to vet this, and they wouldn't let him vet it.
Oh my God.
Like, it was so weird. So that's how the commercial side of this started. This is how it started impacting patients, because they went live in Walgreens. So finally, Hunter actually says, at least let me see this thing that they said was from Johns Hopkins University saying that they vetted the technology. At least let me see that, because I can't get this thing to do anything. Right. And they hesitantly hand him this 2-page piece of paper from John Hopkins that's a summary of a meeting that they had that says, this could be promising, but this is, and it actually says at the bottom, this is no way an endorsement or full review of this product. And he laughed. He was like, you gave these people $147 million off of this 2 pieces of paper that say jack shit. That's what Walgreens did. And once again, old men, they seem to be in love with her. Like the Safeway CEO brought her a model airplane and said, I predict your next one will be real. And then when the guy, the head of Walgreens found that out, he was like, we need to move faster because we have to show Elizabeth more love. He actually said, we need to show Elizabeth more love. Dude.
This bitch is nuts.
Calm the fuck down. But they let everything slide because 1, they were enamored with her, and 2, they were afraid of missing out.
Oh my God. This whole I don't understand how anybody. So you're just I'm
So
confused.
yeah. Thanks for checking out part 2 of our Theranos series. Make sure to subscribe so the conclusion will download automatically. Love your faces. Like what you hear? Rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. And follow us on our Facebook page by searching Q as in Cucumber. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at QAIC_Lara, LARA, and QAIC_Tanya, TANYA. And we want to hear from you. Share your stories by emailing us at qasincucumber@yahoo.com, and you might just hear them on a future episode. Love your faces.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.